Do you track time in your campaigns? If not, you may not notice how fast in-game PCs level up. Especially lower level PCs. It's not unusual for a new party of adventurers to grow exponentially in power in just like a few days. Especially if you're using things like XP leveling and you're just doing a gauntlet of fights and traps and all this other stuff. It's very easy if you're not paying attention to a campaign for especially low level characters to really ramp up in power very, very quickly, which it's kind of hard to grok narratively in universe. Like, oh, there were a bunch of country bumpkins that came into town a few days ago and they came back and now they are, murder machines and control great magics that nobody else in this town has access to. What? They've been gone for like 4 days. What happened? And I want you to consider this, that most published campaigns that take place over the course of like a few weeks, maybe even a few months, like even the published things are incredibly, let's say they're diet size. They are very small, encapsulated, and also include leveling up very quickly. So this isn't just a problem for us dungeon masters who are trying to do homebrew stuff. This is a ongoing sort of issue, specifically with D&D, though it works with pretty much any XP-based game, but especially D&D. The idea is that the PCs kind of go from being nobodies to killing god-level monsters most of the time in such a small, encapsulated time period. They could go from being absolutely nobodies to killing gods before people in the world even know who they are. And we're not talking about like people on a continent on the other side of the world. We're talking about like people in a city that's like 200 miles away, because they are growing in power faster than the spread of their reputation can spread. Because reputation has to be traveled by foot and hoof and sail. And that's the only way that the rumors of your party are going to spread. So it's very easy for your players to go from first level to maybe 6th or 7th level if they're doing a hardcore grind set of dungeons and adventures. They could walk into the city thinking they're the cock of the walk, and people are like, I have no clue who you people are. And they're like, where do these random extremely powerful individuals come from? And we haven't heard about them or where they've come from or anything like that. And it's just really hard to grok. Maybe you have a different issue. Maybe you're like me and you want to use all those fun proficiencies and downtime rules. But D&D's designers give you basically no practical way to make it a part of your campaign, and they don't incorporate them in anything more than really lip service in their published campaigns. The one exception to that would be something like Strixhaven, just because Strixhaven is built off of a school schedule, so it is the only one where it feels like downtime is really an integral part of the design of that adventure. Even things like the DMG, whether you want to look at the 2014 one or the 2024 one, they don't give you a lot of examples about. They tell you what downtime is, but they don't tell you really how or why you should use it. And that's usually the sort of thing that allows you to kind of make the internal logic of the world work as far as power scaling. When you're like, oh, well, we went and adventured in this crypt, and we just kind of hung out for a bit. Afterwards, we spent our gold, we lived some good lifestyle, we did that, and then after a while, another adventure came along the way, so we went and did that, and then instead of taking something that happens from days, it now becomes weeks and months, assuming your campaign continues, years. And then the power scaling starts to make a lot more sense. We have all these tools, and I just want to figure out a way to use them. Like, how can I use them? So what if we could make a way that mechanically in the game it made sense to have downtime. Like, downtime was something we needed mechanically. And that's where we're going to talk about this. And I'm sure some of you have heard this before. We're going to talk about what if we added one simple change for how PCs level up. We could slow down the campaign to make use of those fun downtime rules and those niche proficiencies that usually don't come up a lot. All those tools and extra weird skills that usually don't come up, like animal handling, etc. Help empty the party's bloated coffers of gold, which we know, especially in D&D 5e in 2024. Party ends up with a lot of gold, and since the game designers refuse to give that game a magic economy, there's not a lot to spend that money on. And the third thing we could do, if we made this one little change, we could run more adventures, more side quests, chase more personal PC goals without PCs becoming overleveled. Basically, what if we could put in a way that would keep players from essentially grinding JRPG style? It's not only 100% possible, it's also easy to do, just by introducing a simple thing, and that's adding a time in service requirement to PC advancement. What is time in service? You may not know the term, but you're probably familiar with the concept. Trade apprenticeships, militaries, service organizations, corporations, etc. Any sort of structured organization that's got roles in it probably has a time and service requirement in it. To break it down, a time and service means that one must serve in their role for a specific amount of time to prove they've learned and they're capable at this level before they can advance. Most martial arts structures will also be like, well, you also need to be at this belt level for so many months before you can try to go up a belt. It happens in the scouting organization, it happens in the military, it happens a lot of places. And so there's no reason, I don't think, where we couldn't add this mechanically into D&D. Make it very clear about when a player character can advance by adding another sort of dial that they have to fill. So you don't just have to fill your XP dial, now you also have to fill a time dial to go up to the next level. Reason to keep track of the calendar and the time, so you know when you have the ability to potentially level up again. So what is adding this sort of time and service requirement really do? Well, it relaxes the pacing of your campaign. The bad guys are always scheming, but they're not always putting the world one step away from ruin. There's a big difference when we're addressing a BBEG for something for like a campaign. If the campaign was stop Tiamat from wrecking the material plane, that's not really a campaign, that's just a long one adventure. That's one long adventure where you're kind of doing that, where that is the point, you have to do it right now. A campaign, in my mind, assumes that there are lots of little adventures on the way to a bigger sort of narrative payoff at the end. And usually those adventures are somehow linked together in some way towards the overall campaign and progress towards stopping Tiamat, in this case, at the end of the campaign. Try to translate that into the game narrative of being like, well, the bad guys are always doing stuff. They're not always at the trigger for the doomsday device. They've got to build the doomsday device first, and that takes time. It takes R&D. You gotta figure out what the doomsday device is before you even build it. Then you gotta source the parts or fabricate them. Then you gotta build the stupid thing. Then you gotta figure out where you're gonna put it. You gotta scout locations. You gotta transport it there. You gotta secure it. Then you gotta pull the trigger. And there's all these steps that go up to it. And so that gives us a lot of room in the game to be able to have this sort of timed level up. The player characters can do other things. So what we're trying to do is try to add that in-game element. Say they finished their dungeon delve, they got out, they have enough XP to do it. Let's say they're level 1 characters. They went in, they did their dungeon delve, they came out, they're definitely ready to go up to level 2 XP-wise. But they still got a few days before they can actually fill out that time and service requirement to level up. So what are they going to do for those few days in between adventures? Now there's a spot for us to use some of those downtime rules, kind of check in with other stuff. You can charge them those daily costs of living, have them focus on, what is their public perception based off of the lifestyle level they've chosen. If you have super cheap players that only want to take, because of course most of the lifestyle living things in D&D don't have any mechanics tied to them. So there's no reason to go for the super opulent royal treatment where you're spending like 30 gold a day, except for public perception of that. And if you give them time where they have to spend time in town and interact, suddenly people are going to realize the way that they live. just like it does with any sort of classism in the real world. We have an understanding about, oh, this is sort of the level, I guess, of person that we're dealing with, and that can be really different. So if you have characters that are just barely off the streets, right, they're staying in their like 1 silver a day accommodations or whatever it is in the Skid Row somewhere, and then they're trying to get an audience with the local noble, and the local noble's like, no. Sorry, I don't entertain the riffraff. So you need to do this thing where you have to sort of manage your own reputation in between adventures as well. One of the things that's important with the system of doing this sort of time and service is that we have those first level of characters. They came out of the adventure. They're ready to go up to 2nd level, but they got a few days. That's not really enough maybe to do a bunch of downtime stuff, but they could go do some more adventuring. Now, the important thing for this is that no amount of additional adventuring is going to reduce that time frame. It won't accelerate their ability to level up anymore. I probably wouldn't even grant them XP for it. But there are other things that you might go adventuring for. So when you do this, it creates this time bubble during each level where it gives the players a reason to get invested in maybe non-dungeon crawling activities first. They can practice their profession, they can craft items, they can learn their new proficiencies, they can use those downtime things. But now there's also a reason for them to maybe want to build and maintain a bastion, whether that's to save on cost of living, to make sure that they're doing things outside, and have things going on that are outside of dungeon delving and adventuring. Get them invested in the community of the NPCs in the place wherever they're setting their stuff up, wherever they decide to take their break and hang out for a while. Use this time for players to work on researching rumors and secrets and clues to the BBEG's next evil scheme, just like we talked about with the Doomsday device. Well, we know they need to source some materials. This would be a good place to be like, let my thief or whoever put their ear to the ground and see if they can dig up some rumors about people asking for weird materials, or people asking for out of the ordinary or exotic or very expensive materials that seems kind of new and random, and maybe we try to figure out what they're doing there, and maybe that tells us where our next adventure side. So rather than us as the DM giving them the adventure, they can sort of find the adventure that they want to go off to next. Make it a little bit more investigative, a little bit more player oriented, where they get to make the choice about how they wanted to progress, how they wanted to tackle this challenge. You give them the big challenge and give them little stepping stones to get there, and they can find out how to do that. Now, it kind of depends on your group. I can very much see whether it might be your players or it might be you as a dungeon master and be like, I actually don't want to do downtime, so why would I ever do this? I think the time and service as a requirement for leveling up is still helpful, even if you don't want to do the downtime stuff. First, it's going to lengthen the time frame of your campaign, especially for lower levels, which I think is very helpful, because it's real easy to blow through the low levels of D&D, just going through XP and not really stick and stay in there and play that part of the game, which is unfortunate when we know that the average campaign goes up to what, level 7 or 9? I can't remember off the top of my head, but we know the research from the surveys is, what is it, 90% of campaigns end before people reach level 9. The real meat of a campaign, the frame that everybody likes to stay in, is levels 4 through 7. That seems to be the key ones that people focus in on. But if we start at level 1, we can do all that stuff up to level 4, expand a lot of the campaign, and then once we get to those levels, we can expand those levels out a little bit more. So the most fun part of the campaign, and not have to deal with all the shenanigans of high-level D&D, is to expand those out a little bit and let them take just a little bit longer, without them making feel like we're stopping the players from leveling up. But if you have players that don't want to do downtime, and you as a DM don't want to do downtime, I think that time and service will still help you, even if you're running things like dungeon delves. You can give them other motivations for going on dungeon delves other than XP. It's a great way to sort of run more adventures at each level and each tier of play. Be able to play longer in those levels that we know is the sweet spot for D&D 5e or 2024. We can invest in our PC's backstories with quick side missions. They can throw huge parties, grab adventure hooks from if they have a magic item wish list that they can chase down and go after stuff like that. That's slowing down time between adventures. Also gives you the ability to try out new styles of gaming. Like maybe you run a lot of narrative kind of based, or adventure of the week dungeon delves where you just plop down, a 3-session dungeon delve. They do that and they go back to town, then they go to the next one, etc., etc. Having this sort of slow time between adventures, this is a great time to try out different game styles. So maybe you're like, we haven't really done any hex crawling before, so let's do like maybe a little hex crawl, this sort of side adventure, just to see if the group kind of likes that, maybe to see if I like running that as Dungeon Master. Maybe one of the things that they do in between sort of the broader adventures, maybe they go back to town and it's a yawning portal situation where it's like, oh, by the way, this town's on top of a gigantic mega dungeon, and the mega dungeon's not the overall campaign, but maybe that's a great place to pick up magic items. They get back to town, they're like, well, we've got a few days to burn, why don't we hop down the well here into the mega dungeon and see if we can pick up some useful magic items. And maybe that's the preeminent way that you get magic items in your campaign, is by having them go search for them. It's a great way to take things where players, make those magic item wish lists, and you can take them and be like, okay, I'm going to take these magic items and I'm going to sprinkle them throughout this mega dungeon. So if you want these magic items, I'm telling you that there is a place where you can go and get them. I'm going to build time into the campaign for you to have the opportunity to go do that without having to worry about the campaign passing you by. I'm basically giving you a day pass to go dungeon delving, to go look for loot. Maybe you have a bunch of characters that most of your campaign's very combat heavy. You're like, well, I kind of want to run this weird social interaction party kind of adventure. I don't want to make it super important to the game because they might fail it because they didn't build characters that are built for social situations. I also want to see if people are interested in it and maybe they want more stuff like this in the game. So I'm going to run this little side quest where there's infiltrate this noble's party and steal an item or convince somebody to help them with something or whatever, pulled up or picked up from somewhere else to run. Time as a DM to also experiment with things that maybe you want to run. That's a lot of talk about what it does, all the benefits of it, and how I think it can help our games. How do we add the time and service fulfillment? What does that look like? It's a little loosey-goosey, put together what I think makes sense for me. And I just broke it down by tier. We have tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, tier 4, and those are the level bands 1 through 4, 5 through 10, 11 through 16, 17 through 20. For that first tier, levels 1 through 4, it's 1 week per level. So you need to spend 1 week at first level, 1 week at second level, 1 week at third level, 1 week at fourth level. In tier 2, levels 5 through 10, before you go up to 6th level, you need to spend a month in-game as 5th level. So as you grow in power, the more difficult it is to level up, gain our proficiency, and become better and better and better at it, and that becomes harder and harder to do. You can probably see where this is going. In tier 3, that's levels 11 through 16, it's a season per level. And then by the time you get to level 4, which is our level 17 through 20, you need to be spending at least 1 year at each of those levels, which gives you an opportunity to run many, many years. So incorporating sort of a time and service aspect for a level 1 through 20 campaign, if you did it by the book, they did it as expediently as possible, that would take 6 years in game. 6 years to become one of the most powerful people in the world, in all of existence, is still really, really fast when we consider how many things are out there and how old they are and how powerful they are. Yeah, it's quick, but it's not stupid quick. A campaign that you run that is 6 years in game, I feel like that gives you so much time to be able to do so much stuff and have such a fulfilling campaign. I feel like most 1 to 20 campaigns take maybe months in game, depending if they have to do any sort of weird overland travel. If they don't have to do that, yeah, certainly months. So let me know, have you done something like this before? Have you tinkered with how and when to level up characters, and how's that gone for you? But I think this time and service requirement could be really, really helpful for a lot of people's games, so try it out for yourself. I think the DMs like having a game mechanics reason for including downtime. Like there is an actual space and reason for these rules and how to use them in the game. Because unfortunately, the D&D designers didn't give us those. Giving players the opportunity to explore their characters' individual proficiencies, having their own sort of side quest goals or things that they're trying to accomplish, and providing them the space to do that within the campaign to take care of, and not having to worry about them over leveling because of it, because of XP. Especially make those downtime rules, because I like a lot of the downtime stuff. There's really no game mechanic reason built in for why we should be using it. So I want to make a reason for why we should be using it. Thanks for hanging out with me, guys. Always a fun one. Glad to get back to it. I've been kind of out of pocket for a minute. for all sorts of stuff. Family obligations, illness, injury, all sorts of fun stuff. So it's great to jump back into the saddle, and we'll pick this up next time with some more stuff. But for now, that's it. Thanks, everybody, and I'll see you guys next time. All right? Bye-bye.